Hi everyone, 73129, named City of Winchester, made by Lima, has arrived at my depot today for a one-off service. Now, I've done a number of Lima service videos, but the Class 73s are slightly different in the approach that's required, so I thought I'd put it together so that you can view it as well. So, she's just arrived from a friend of mine. Let's give her a quick run and see what she's like. She runs, but she's very grindy. So by the sound of it, she could definitely benefit from the one-off Lima service that I usually do. So let's get her ready for the workbench and we'll go straight in. So we've got her on the workbench and in the cradle to protect her. First, to have a look, the traction tyres seem in good order. Quite a few scratches on the wheels there, a little bit of wear in the bearings, but otherwise not too bad. Now, Class 73s, the body is clipped to the glazing at the front and back, depending on which way you're looking at it. And as plastic gets older and brittler, this can become a problem. So for Class 73s, I never open the body unless I desperately have to. So I'm going to show you what I do instead. What I do, let's get the bits tray ready, is I remove the bottom plate of the motor bogie. Like this, and then jiggle and wiggle until the motor bogie comes out. There we go. So we've now got the motor bogie out. Now what I'll probably do is desolder that wire there so that I can put the body completely to one side. Okay, we've put the body to one side and I've desoldered the motor bogie. So it did have a connection there that goes back to the engine, and I've just disconnected this one as well, which came from that brush, picks up off there, so that we can strip that completely and see what it needs doing. So let's start. Now I'm going to remove the pickup from the bottom and set that in the tray to one side. And the next thing to do is remove these two screws to gain access to the armature and brushes. And again, everything put in the tray so that you don't lose anything. Just keep your finger on the plate because the brush springs will tend to push things off and you don't want to lose anything, and just lift him off. So as you can see, we have plenty of brushes there, nothing wrong with them. Just have a little bit of a clean up. The brush springs are in place in here, so we're just going to put them straight in the tray to keep safe. And just have a look at the top. Open this up for later on. Yep, that's all okay, but need a bit of a clean as well. Now withdraw the armature, which should just pop out. Oh, it's come out with the magnet, makes it easier. So there is the armature. Which all looks okay, again needed a clean. Now the magnet, I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but there are little bits of metal and wire that are loose on it. You can just see it adhering to the tweezers. One of the most important things to do now is to remove all of that, otherwise it will cause trouble in the motor later on. So I'm just going to do that. Okay, so we've stripped down that far now. Let's just zoom out a little bit. So now we can individually check each side of the gears. And I can definitely feel some lumps and bumps. That one's extremely stiff and quite a significant snag there. I expect there's a large piece of plastic to remove off this gear here, but we'll carry on stripping down. Now then, these little nuts are almost impossible to get hold of nowadays. Some people may still carry them, but I haven't found a good supplier. So we're going to use a nut spinner to take them off, and when we put them back, we're only going to put them back finger tight, because you don't want to strip the thread. It's very easy to do. Nut spinner. There's one of them into the tray. Keep safe. And there's the next one into the tray to keep safe. Now we can start pulling the gears off. Generally find that those need a little bit more assistance. Now you can see in there that we have the little small gears that actually run straight onto the wheel gear. I don't propose to remove them. I'm going to clean round them and give this a good clean up with the brush and some IPA, and then we'll start looking for the moulding sprues that need to come off any cogs. Now, in previous videos you've seen me use this ultrasonic bath with some IPA fluid. I don't usually do it for just one locomotive, because the fluid has to be thrown away and it's quite wasteful. What I'm using it for this time is I have spray IPA, and I'm going to just give everything a good coating so it'll still work on it. Let that set for a bit, and then I'm going to get to work with the toothbrush cleaning everything off. Okay, we've cleaned back, and as expected there is some little moulding sprues still in place on the cogs. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. It's very difficult to see if the camera's seeing it, but I've marked it just there, just on the top of the cog. And there's also one on this one, and again I've just marked it there. So what I'm going to do is very carefully, using the scalpel, trim it off flush to the top of the rest of that gear, and make sure there's no bits left in either side. You mustn't damage the profile of the tooth itself, but removing that little git there will mean it will smoothly transition with the next gear, and it will greatly reduce the noise. Okay, so I have removed all the little gits of plastic, but there are only usually two on the driving wheels cogs. There were even some on the little cogs that I didn't remove, but I've done that now, that's clean. And I'm now satisfied that there is no clunking or grinding, and it's really free to turn. As you can see, it will spin quite happily on both sides. So that means we've done those gears. What I have just noticed though is that there is a lot of marks on these wheels, and the treads are also highly polished. Someone has used something quite aggressive to clean the wheels with. Of course, I'd only ever recommend something like one of these brushes, but only because it's got traction tyres on the other side, only on the one side when it was spinning under power. So I suspect that would be the person that previously owned this loco. Anyway, so the next job is to check all the individual gears, and give them exactly the same treatment. If I find any obvious problems, I'll come back and let you see them. Okay, I've been through all the gears. They weren't too bad. There were some little moulding sprues on the tops of these, which I've removed. You wouldn't have seen it on camera, so I didn't bother to let you see it. And you can see by the state of the paper and the brush and my fingers how much muck I got off. So now it's a case of making sure that the pinions here are completely free of any muck, as the old toothbrush does a good job again for that. And obviously we want that bearing for the motor there clean as well. So I'm now going to reassemble the gears and we're going to test them. Now then, in testing the gears, you see I have not put the final one on that goes to the motor. That's nice and smooth and silky, as you can see. But if I put this one on and then put this in, I mean obviously you can't feel that when you're viewing it, but Do you see how it's much stiffer? And what it shows is that this one isn't moving very freely. So what we've probably got is a bit of muck inside the cog. What I use very gently is a drill almost the same size, and just whilst twisting it, move it around inside the cog. And if there's any little bits of flash or plastic mouldings in there, that should clear them off nicely. Okay, that took a little bit more time than expected. This one, which wasn't moving as smoothly, I had to very carefully go around with this little bit of abrasive, that was a mandrel, what it's called, but it just clears it out. You don't want to make any scoring or marks inside the cogs, because that will lead to wear. And also on the pinion which it rests on, I had a little flange of plastic up the top, and I just had to very gently go around with a piece of wet and dry and remove it. And now we pop him back in, and he's friend, and now as you can see, nice and smooth. I haven't put the little bolts back yet. I don't do that to the very last because they have a tendency to disappear into orbit. So what you're aiming for is smooth gears with no oil whatsoever. This is important. I haven't put any oil on yet. That comes next. As ever, I shall be using my Hob-e-Lube oils because I prefer them. Now I'm just going to put a little drop I'm not sure if the camera's seeing this, but there's a little drop of oil going on the pinion to the little gear before the drive wheels onto its pinion where it runs, and then a little drop of oil on that pinion. Now this got a nice little recessed cup on these, so we can just put a drop of oil in there and that will track down through. And that's really silky smooth now. So we'll just do the same for the other side. Okay, the bolts are back in place, so everything's nice and safe where it should be. Now what you're aiming for, I usually do it on the track, but as we're demonstrating, is that there's virtually no resistance. And the only oil that is on at the moment is on the pinions of the gears. The gears themselves have not been oiled. We've still not put the armature back, but we're now just verifying that everything else is nice and smooth even before we add oil, which it certainly seems to be. Obviously get a cotton bud now and just remove a little bit of excess oil that there happens to be about. Now the next job is to put the magnet back, and you'll see that he goes in this way round with the lots of little bits of metal on this one. If you don't put him in the right way round, your train will run in reverse. And the little tab just engages up the top there. Okay, magnet back. We want to give the armature cog a really good cleaning. Using some IPA again on a cotton bud. We'll just polish up the face of the armature, paying particular attention to the gaps. This one's had very little use. You can see there's usually quite a bit of scoring from the brushes when you get older models, but this one virtually none at all. So it's quite a new model, or one that's not had hardly any use. Yeah, so that's nice and shiny now. This now just drops back in and a magnet will hold it in place. So we're just going to clean up the top plate to the brush housings first. Get rid of all the IPA at this point. We don't want any of that because it will remove the oil that we're going to put on later. So that just goes back on like that. And the two shorter screws, which were the screws for the plate, and when you're centering this, just leave the first one you do up loose and then do the other one up, and just give it a quick wiggle. Make sure it's going to sit actually absolutely square. So the armature's now back in, so the two sides are linked through the armature drive, so it will now be stiffer and you can hear the rattle. Now bear in mind, we've got no oil anywhere yet, and we need to oil the armature bearings now there and there. Now when we do this one, we want the tiniest drop, because if we put too much in, it will go onto the commutator plate and short out with the brushes. So that's more than enough that's in there now, and then just give it a little twist to get it going. This one, you can depress it in a little bit and just let the oil flood in there. Not massive, but enough. And already she's running quite smooth. So the next job is to put the brushes back. We'll try and do it on camera, a little bit fiddly. Perhaps I'll just do one, because there's a point to be made about the brushes. So you have the thick end down, just open that back a little bit more so it's easier to see. Thick end down. I don't like doing this on camera because these tend to fly off as well. So you just angle them in and then bring the brush spring back down. Now, to do the brush springs properly, finger on it and push it down, pliers under there and lift up a little bit. And what you're aiming for is that sort of gap. See, there is a defined gap, you can see a bit of the spring. Do not crush that in, because that puts excessive brush pressure on the armature, makes the loco run hot and inefficiently, and wears your brushes out quick. And put the other one on off camera. Right, so the motor bogie is pretty much reassembled. We're now ready for testing. So I've got a couple of power clips from my controller either side of the brushes. The side we're interested in is the gears. I'm just going to hold it so my hands are clear and just bring up the power. And you can see that she's actually running quite good already. We've still not lubricated any of the gears, just the pinions they run on. Should point out that you need to clean the backs of these little bolts very carefully so you don't lose them, and there's going to need to be a little drop of oil placed underneath them. Do that now. It really is just a small bit, just so that the plate, the face of the cog, can move freely against the bolts. So now comes the fun bit. This is putting on Hob-e-Lube gear grease. So we'll get her turning a little bit slower than that, and then what you do is you get the grease coming out and just web it on to the gears like you can see there. You get that satisfying little cobweb effect. Now initially, whilst it settles in, you'll hear the motor will run slightly slower. It's getting used to it. So as you see, she slowed down a little bit. That will change. Now we just changed direction. When the webbing goes, the grease is nicely spread on all the teeth. Pay good attention to the outside cogs of these here, because they run onto the armature. That's a big old drive cog, so that could do with a little bit of extra lubrication. The rest of them you don't need too much really, just enough. Now when it comes to the driving wheel gears, you want very minimum, because if you put too much on, you'll find that the grease will then get onto your track, and you don't want that because it will rot the traction tyres and obviously cause dirt, which will spoil the pickup. So I've only put just a little bit on. I use the gear grease because it doesn't fly off and go everywhere, but even so you still need to be careful. So now have a listen. The characteristic Lima rattle is all but gone. We have another place that needs oil, and that of course is the axle bearings. Little drop in each housing. And one in the middle. This will be for the pickup when we refit it. So that all appears to be running very nice. It's drawing 200 milliamps just looking my ammeter, which is on par with modern motors. So don't anybody tell me that Lima motors are not good. They're a little bit basic and they need a little bit of refining, but they do the job well and they'll keep going for many years. Right, so all I need to do now, a little clean up of any of the excess oil, and then refit the pickup plate and put the motor back into the loco. Okay, so here we are, we're gradually reversing the process. So I have resoldered the wires on. That one, just need to keep him out of the way, make sure he doesn't get into the armature area. Then wiggle this back into the frame. Okay, after struggling for some time, you get her so that she's sitting pretty square. Pull it over to one side slightly. Drop the first screw through the bogey there. And then offer the screw to the hole and begin turning. You'll feel it grab. And then we can do the same with the other side. Again, you'll feel it grab. And it's actually got the motor bogey. And then tighten them up. And that is now in place. I can see I've got a little bit of oil on the traction tyres there. So what we need to do is clean that off with IPA. An aircon controller to that side. It's always opposite the traction tyres for the pickup. And then turn the controller up and she spins. Now just run that on there, and that will make sure that there's no oil left on the surface of the traction tyres. Okay, nice and clean. Now whilst we've got a cotton bud with IPA on it, this is a good time now to give the trailing wheels a clean. And they've been heavily scrubbed as well. Oh well. Do both sides because you don't want dirt being spread around the layout if there's any on the other side. A more suitable brush to clean perhaps these wheels with will be one of these, and you could also use it to scrub these clean. It won't do any damage. With one final bit of lubrication to do, and that is on the wheel bearings of the trailing bogie. Just a drop each side. Okay, so let's put her back on the track and we'll see how she sounds and performs now. So here we go. First of all, how's that for slow running? Not bad for Lima. And that will only get better as the oil and the grease work in. What we might do is take her down to the layout for a quick trial. I'm sure Julian won't mind.